All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to untangle this really complex web of risks and opportunities that are shaping our world here in early 2026. We're talking about everything from global treaties just falling apart to these massive seismic shifts in the financial markets. We're going to connect the dots and show you what this new and frankly challenging global reality looks like. So let's start with a single really critical question. For about half a century, there was a set of rules, treaties, trade deals, alliances, that created a pretty predictable world order. It wasn't perfect, but it was there. But right now, in 2026, that whole architecture is, well, it's decomposing. So what happens when it's just gone? And that question brings us right to our first section. We are living in an era where the old certainties are just fading away. They're being replaced by something much more transactional, much more volatile. The entire playbook is literally being rewritten in real time. The new name of the game is something called geoeconomic confrontation. This isn't just about friendly competition anymore. This is about weaponizing the economy. Think about it. Trade, technology, finance, they're not being used as tools for cooperation. They're being used as instruments of power. And this isn't some niche idea. The World Economic Forum has flagged this as one of the absolute biggest threats we face right now. This quote here just captures the shift so bluntly. The Stimson Center says the old order is decomposing. That idea of one superpower holding everything up like Atlas, that's a thing of the past. And that creates a power vacuum. And as we know, vacuums don't stay empty for long. Something always rushes in to fill them. And you can see the economic consequences right here. Global growth is still happening, sure, but it's incredibly messy. It's all over the place. You've got the US powering ahead at 2.6%, mostly thanks to a huge surge in AI investment. Meanwhile, the Eurozone is kind of sluggish at 1.3%. China is carefully managing its slowdown to hit 4.8% growth, but the real standout is India, with a super robust 6.5%, all driven by strong domestic demand. So every region is running its own race, which creates a really fragmented global picture. But this breakdown of order, it has its most dramatic, and I'd say most terrifying symbol in the quiet death of nuclear arms control. This is where the abstract theory becomes frighteningly real. This timeline shows you just how fast everything unraveled. For years, the New START treaty put a cap on US and Russian nuclear weapons. But then, in 2023, Russia just suspended all the inspections and data sharing that made the treaty actually work. And then, on February 5th of this year, 2026, it just expired. Poof, gone. For the first time in decades, there are zero legally binding limits on the world's two largest nuclear arsenals. And the response to that? A massive new arms race. The US is already on the hook for a $1.7 trillion modernization of its nuclear forces. To put that number in perspective, that's more than the entire GDP of many developed countries. But of course, this isn't happening in a vacuum. Russia and China see this. They don't see modernization. They see expansion. And so they're hitting the accelerator on their own programs in response. We have literally moved from one world to another. On the left, you had a system. Yeah, it was imperfect, but it was a system, built on limits, verification, and some degree of stability. Now, look at the right. We're in what some people are calling the third nuclear era. It's an unrestricted arms race where the risk of a miscalculation or a crisis just spiraling out of control is higher than it's been at any point since the Cold War. Okay, so let's bring this down from the global level and see how all this friction is actually playing out on the ground. We're going to zoom in on India, a major economy that's really caught in the crosscurrents right now. So the first 9 days of 2026 were just brutal for the Indian markets. Foreign investors pulled out nearly 12,000 crore rupees. That's over $1 billion in just over a week. Look, this isn't just market noise, it's a direct signal of how global money reacts when geopolitical and trade uncertainty starts to spike. And a huge driver of that uncertainty was a single failed phone call. The U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick revealed that a major trade deal had totally collapsed because of it. In his comment, "The train left the station," that sent a shockwave through the market. It was a signal that the window for easy cooperation had just slammed shut. But this is where India's story gets really fascinating. You see this split. On one hand, the financial markets are feeling the pain from foreign selling and tariff threats. But on the other hand, India's real, actual economy remains incredibly strong. It's still on track to grow at 6.5%, powered by domestic demand and a huge push in manufacturing. It really is a tale of two economies, one that's vulnerable to global winds, and another that's powered from within. So this flight from risk, all that money doesn't just disappear into thin air. It has to flow somewhere. And that brings us to the massive countermove we're seeing, a huge surge into strategic hard assets, especially precious metals. Gold has been hitting record highs, sure, but you have got to look at silver. In 2025 alone, it posted a staggering 147% gain. That wasn't just a minor rally, it was a fundamental repricing of the metal that has put it on basically every investor's radar. And this slide explains exactly why silver is so unique. It has this dual identity. On one hand, it's a monetary metal, a classic safe haven against all the geopolitical risk and currency chaos we've been talking about. But on the other hand, it's a critical industrial metal, absolutely essential for the biggest growth stories on the entire planet. And this industrial demand is the real key. Solar panel production is the biggest consumer, and it's growing like crazy. But you also have electric vehicles. They use more silver per car than old school ones. And now there's a new source of demand, the AI and data center build-out, which needs silver for high-efficiency electrical parts. So this isn't some cyclical thing. It's a structural, long-term driver that's creating a supply deficit for the 5th year in a row. So with all these different forces in play, what happens next? Let's try to put all this together into a practical framework you can use. Okay, we can think about the rest of 2026 in 3 possible scenarios. First, you've got the base case, a controlled slowdown. This is where markets are choppy, but they generally grind higher. Second, the risk case, some kind of geopolitical shock like a conflict flaring up somewhere, which would cause a sharp spike in assets like gold. And finally, you have the tail risk, a major crisis that forces a rapid, systemic repricing of everything, where insurance assets like precious metals become the only game in town. And all of this really leads to one final critical question. As the old rules dissolve and the world gets more fragmented, more unpredictable, what is a truly safe asset? Is it a government bond? Is it a stock in a supposedly stable country? Or is it something tangible, something that exists outside the system itself? That is the question that's going to define investing in this new era.